Taoiseach Leo Varadkar has now admitted that his own lockdown is a draconian infringement on civil rights. But will he be giving those rights back? Well, not anytime soon, says Leo. This is Ben Scallan and you're watching Gript Media. Taoiseach Leo Varadkar has now dubbed his own lockdown absolutely bonkers and draconian and called for a new normal to help society build back better.
Yeah, well, the sooner we can repeal that legislation, the better, in my view. You know, if you told me 2 years ago that we'd live in a country where it was illegal to leave the state for non-essential reasons, illegal to enter the state for non-essential reasons, that you couldn't have people over to your own house, or you couldn't meet outside with more than 15 people, I would have thought you were absolutely bonkers. Like what's happened in the last year or two really is unprecedented. We overused that term, but what's happened in the last year really is unprecedented. You know, we want to go to a new normal. We want to build back better, as people say. But one thing I definitely do not want to keep on the statute books is this draconian legislation for any longer than is necessary. Unfortunately, it is still necessary. Like, we're not out of the woods yet. And that's why we're going to have to extend it.
Believe it or not, this was actually not the first time Leo described the lockdown as a severe clampdown on civil rights. Just a couple of weeks before that, he said this.
Because of the pandemic, we have passed some extraordinary laws in this House and signed into law some extraordinary regulations that I never thought we would do. And we have curtailed people's freedom in a way that I never thought we would in the past year or so. And we've given Gardaí powers to do things that I never thought we would give the Gardaí the powers to do. But this is an unprecedented situation. This is a pandemic. It's not over yet.
So to briefly recap in his own words, he has described his own lockdown as absolutely bonkers, draconian, and a curtailment of the people's freedom. Is this lad angling for a job at Gript or something? Your man is stealing all my lines. I don't know who gave him access to my notes. Regardless, see now how he's trying to play both sides. He wants to be against the lockdown and say how terrible it is, while also justifying continuing it.
But as soon as we can expire those laws, the better, in my view, because I want to see people's individual freedoms restored, the inviolability of their homes restored, and Garda powers returned to what they should be.
Thank you.
And I know you and I may come from a very different angle philosophically when it comes to politics, but I think we both share a commitment to individual liberty and personal freedom, and the sooner we can get rid of these laws, the better.
He has a commitment to individual freedom. Are you kidding me? What freedom is that exactly? The freedom to do what you're told by the state or else? Leo's commitment to individual freedom is about the same level of commitment that Bill Clinton has to his marriage. But it actually gets worse, believe it or not.
But there'll be proper debate in that and all, and I would encourage deputies to speak freely on this. You know, don't feel that you have that you're against public health or something if you raise these concerns. Civil liberties matters, and you know, concerns about civil liberties have almost disappeared in the last year or so, and that bothers me.
So Leo is apparently baffled that more people aren't speaking out against his lockdown. He doesn't understand why individuals aren't more vocal against it. Have we all just forgotten about Dr. Martin Feely of the HSE, who was pressured into resigning because he spoke out against the lockdown? They told him his position was untenable because he dared to criticise the restrictions and government policy. Or what about Dr. Patrick Morrissey, a Limerick medical doctor who was removed from his position for speaking at an anti-lockdown rally where he criticised NPHET? In other words, the handful of brave souls who had the courage to speak out were absolutely crucified and made an example of by the government and their cronies. Then suddenly they're baffled as to why more people didn't speak out. It's kind of hard to speak out, Leo, when your government has made peaceful protests illegal and punishable by jail time. But stop and think for a minute about what this man is actually saying. He's apparently, quote, bothered by the fact that people aren't more concerned about civil liberties. Liberties that he took away and he has no plans to give back in the near future, by his own admission. He's even said that he wouldn't rule out another lockdown come the winter months when the cases likely will shoot back up again, assuming this thing is seasonal. But apparently to Leo, it's deeply disturbing that nobody has tried to stop him from implementing what he calls draconian legislation. He wants to know why people didn't do more to oppose him. This is like a footballer knowingly scoring a goal while offside, then wondering where the ref is. It's gaslighting of the highest order. The galling nature of this statement aside, however, it also reveals a lot about our leader's vision for this country. To Leo, the real travesty is not the draconian laws themselves. Taking the people's rights away isn't a huge deal. The part that seriously concerns him is that people haven't been tut-tutting at it more. In his perfect world, we'd all be talking about how terrible the lockdown is and have a big lively national debate about it on RTE, but ultimately remain under the state's jackboot while doing nothing about it. What Leo is really lamenting here is not the loss of democracy, but the loss of the appearance of democracy. It looks bad to have the entire government, the media, the NGOs, and the public health experts all unified in lockstep against the people's most fundamental freedoms. It feels sketchy, it gives off whiffs of authoritarianism. Even the so-called Sinn Féin opposition party incidentally seemed to oppose nothing. Every step of the way they voted with the government or abstained. For example, just recently when the government voted to extend their emergency COVID powers for another 6 months, Sinn Féin, like the little fence-sitting weasels they are, ended up abstaining and allowing the vote to pass. Only 3 senators voted against it in total, all of whom were independents. And that way, for Sinn Féin, nobody can say that they voted for it or against it. They want to play both sides and hedge their bets while the country burns so that they can't be blamed for anything that happens, or so they think. They stand everywhere and nowhere if they think that it'll win them votes. If you need more evidence of this, here's Sinn Féin's health spokesperson David Cullinan bragging about how the opposition has been, quote, remarkably supportive of the government over the past year.
I think in European terms, when you look across the political spectrum in different parts of Europe, the support that you have got and your government has got from the opposition, by and large, in relation to responding to COVID, has been quite remarkable, given the huge difficulties that all of these public health restrictions has brought about for workers and for families and for businesses.
That was Cullinan speaking to Stephen Donnelly, and again he essentially said that compared to other countries, Ireland's opposition has been remarkably supportive of the government's COVID response, even though it caused massive hardship for workers and families and so on. If you don't believe me, rewind the video and listen again. That's exactly what he said. This is the so-called opposition. This is the great change that everyone is voting for. And so when Leo says that he wishes more people would speak out in favor of civil liberties, it's not that he wants to give those liberties back. He could do it tomorrow if he wanted to, and yet we're still here. What he wants is for the carefully constructed facade of openness in this country to be maintained. We have to keep up the illusion that we have a free debate and alternative viewpoints in this society, even though nothing could be further from the truth. And then when people speak out, the parties in charge can just ignore them anyway and do what they always wanted to do in the first place. It's a great arrangement for a control freak politician if you can get away with it. Leaders like Leo Varadkar and Micheál Martin and Mary Lou McDonald think that if they remain polite and outwardly proper while implementing the most heavy-handed and outrageous policies imaginable, that will somehow nullify the near tyranny of what they're doing. They think that if they say, I understand how difficult this is, while subjecting you to that difficulty deliberately despite your protests, that you'll forgive them for being understanding. It's a perfect example of an iron fist in a velvet glove. Just look at Micheál threatening the general public with more lockdowns if they don't comply during the summer. Plans to ease lockdown restrictions further in July will have to be reviewed if there's evidence that people aren't following the public health guidelines, Taoiseach Micheál Martin has warned. His comments come as Gardaí were called in to disperse large crowds of people socialising in the city centre for a second night in a row. Note that he didn't say we'll have to review it if we have X number of cases. He didn't say we'll have to review it if our ICU capacity is strained. He said we'll review it unless you comply. Shut up, he says, and do what you're told or else. There's the teacher coming out in him yet again. Your man talks to the general public like a dad threatening to deprive his kids of a trip to Disneyland if they're bold. Except instead of Disneyland, it's our fundamental human rights. I swear, Irish public, if you don't celebrate your summer the way I tell you to, we will turn this car around. And they'll say this in one breath, while also bragging about how well their vaccine rollout is doing. Donnelly says that everyone in Ireland will have been offered the jab by September. So why then did the government extend its emergency powers until November? Either the vaccines work like you tell us, in which case this is a totally outrageous continued power grab, or the vaccines don't work, in which case what are you playing at by distributing them? Which is it, lads? For the first lockdown, politicians were told by so-called health experts the biggest loads of bull imaginable, and it was on the basis of these crap models and projections that we shut down the country initially. Here's Professor Sam McConkey last year talking about his predictions for COVID deaths.
I think not just on our health service. Unfortunately, I think this is really a transformation of our society. The best metaphor I can think of is the Spanish flu, as Susan just mentioned, mixed up with the Irish Civil War, which was 100 years ago, mixed up with the 1929 stock market crash, all together at the same time. And the worst case scenario is potentially up to an 80% attack rate. You heard Susan talking about this. So it could be an 80% of that's 4 million. And again, the 2% death rate. It could even be 3 or 4% because a lot of the people in China haven't recovered yet. So it could be 2 or 3% of those 4 million people will die. So again, I know you're good in the numbers. That's 80,000 to 120,000 deaths. So when you say it's all just something we can let blow through, that's not a good option. You got to work through the simple numbers and see what you're really asking for there.
Millions infected in Ireland with 80,000 to 120,000 deaths. Numbers that we now know were never credible. And these totally bogus projections apparently ended up influencing government policy. Up to 85,000 Irish people could die from coronavirus in worst case scenario, Taoiseach indicates, has 3 more diagnosed. Ireland facing event unprecedented in modern times. And then separately, the Minister for Health, Simon Harris, has said that he is taking seriously the advice of expert epidemiologist Professor Sam McConkey, who predicted that there could be between 80,000 and 120,000 deaths in Ireland from coronavirus. And this is a man who has advocated for a level 5 lockdown as a way of combating the virus at least as late as October 2020. At the beginning, when they believed these catastrophically far off models, maybe the initial lockdown made some sort of sense. Maybe if you thought 120,000 people were going to die, you could argue for suspending some fundamental rights, arguably. But what is their excuse now that we know it was all total and utter crap? We've seen the Swedish death rate when you don't lock down, and it was nothing even remotely close to the absurd figures given by our public health experts. So why has our approach remained the exact same despite us having vastly more information now than we did a year ago? The Irish government over the past year have proven themselves to be instinctive authoritarians, despite their boast about being such laid-back, centrist liberals, whatever the hell that means. With the longest and most severe lockdown in all of the EU, we can all see our political leaders clearly for what they are, and no oh-so-relatable TikTok video from Simon Harris or fluffy words of sympathy from Leo Varadkar will ever change that. Please like and share this video, and if you enjoyed it, please consider signing up for a monthly donation via the link on screen to help us produce more content like this. Alternative media like Gript needs all the assistance it can get, and every donation goes a long way. As always, thanks for watching.